best organizations that are getting this right are promoting people into key management positions more so based on their ability to lead, to inspire, to mentor, to coach, to emotionally connect those people to the work that they do.
Welcome to this week's episode with guest Brent Gleeson. The central premise to this podcast and the concept of a mastery journey is one of continual self-improvement, often built on failures, towards elite level performance in all areas of personal and professional life. Today, you have a unique opportunity to learn a bit from Brent's expertise and experience in a very similar area of building high-performance teams. You'll get a glimpse of the methodology in his best-selling book, Taking Point, and that is the core curriculum to a consulting practice of the same name. Brent's a sharp, funny, knowledgeable professional who generously shared not only about his Navy days and the principles learned there, but provided several real-world actionable examples to apply in work as well as in family. So a couple of the key elements I'm taking away to work on myself from today's episode are looking at employee promotion criteria to evaluate and reward the ability to lead, coach, teach, and inspire. That's somewhat in contrast to the historical norm of promoting tenure and subject matter expertise only. And the other, Brent describes building and applying a family charter or ethos with principles, behaviors, and accountability metrics. So with that, let's dive in and take a listen. Hey, today I'm joined by Brent Gleeson, serial entrepreneur, speaker, author. He's had running columns in Forbes and Inc. He's the best-selling author of Taking Point Leadership, a Navy SEAL's 10 fail-safe principles for leading through change. And he's also the founder and CEO of a company by the same name, Taking Point Leadership, which specializes in business transformation. It's a consulting practice focused on building high-performance teams for winning results. I think Brent also can talk about and heads up the SEAL Family Foundation. And most importantly, husband, father of three, probably applying the same leadership techniques, culture building, and leading in a volatile environment of a household of three young children. So, Brent, thanks for joining me today.
I'm trying. Thanks so much. Glad to be on the show.
Always a work in progress. No, I really appreciate it. Hey, so what I left out there maybe was is mentioned in the subtitle of your book. Also, you have a background as a Navy SEAL, but somewhat unique. I think you went from finance major to Navy SEAL to back out to MBA and digital entrepreneur. It's a unique, interesting journey. Do you mind? We'll do a bit of a recap on your background.
Yeah.
Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, sure. I'll just give you a quick synopsis. So I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Ended up doing my undergrad at Southern Methodist University. It's not why I chose the school. I applied to about 7 different schools, all out of state, but Southern Methodist University was the best choice for me. They have a great undergraduate business program and a great graduate school business program. So I went to school there, played rugby. Like many at SMU, I was in a fraternity, but didn't really participate much because we had a pretty rigorous schedule. But one of my close friends at SMU, one of my fraternity brothers who was a year behind me in school, was, one of these guys who had a dream a vision of one day joining the Navy and attempting to become a SEAL. And I had never had any aspirations really of joining the military at all. Keep in mind, this was pre 9/11, so we'd been at more or less peacetime for quite a while. And I graduated and took a job as a financial analyst with a big commercial real estate investment development firm called Trammell Crow Company. And at that time, his name is Matt. He was a senior. And so he and I actually started training together, nights and weekends, running, swimming, calisthenics. For him, he was actually preparing for the SEAL PT entrance exam. He was going to join the Navy as soon as he graduated. And for me, it was just a way to stay fit and hang out with a buddy and whatnot. So we did that every weekend, every night. I would throw fins and goggles into a backpack after I got home from work and run 4 miles to SMU, swim in their pool for about an hour, do some calisthenics, and I'd run 4 miles home, make a late dinner, go to bed, and do it all again the next day. And gradually, I started reading some more books about the SEAL teams. We were having, obviously, a lot of dialogue about the implications of his journey. And over time, I became just frankly fascinated with their history, their culture, the mindset required to not only navigate the training and selection program, but to be a SEAL. And that coupled with the somewhat boring nature of my entry-level analyst position, I decided to have no regrets. Didn't want to be the guy someday saying, I kind of thought about doing that, but didn't. So I quit my job, and then he and I moved up to Crested Butte, Colorado, to train for months at high altitude to kind of finish off our training regimen and get into the best physical condition that we could. And we did. At that time, I was in the best shape of my life, even though I was a college athlete. That was different. This was training that had to be totally next level.
Right.
And
right. Is that just quick question on that, Brent?
Yeah.
I mean, rugby player, right? I think maybe even captain of your rugby team.
Yep.
Some rugby and hockey players are the craziest people I've ever personally met. So I grew up playing soccer, and I don't know if you ever heard this saying that soccer is a gentleman's sport played by hooligans, and rugby is a hooligan sport played by gentlemen. Yeah, yep. Exactly. So I don't know how true that holds, but did that? So you're saying that was a level of fitness, and you had to take it to another level. And just one of my curiosities as you go on with your story, and you go from training to entering the selection process, I've always wondered, did that physically get you ready? Like, did you feel comfortable as you go on with your background? And did it become, was it still a physical challenge, or was it also more of a mental challenge?
Well, it was both. Having been a rugby player, I was a competitive swimmer growing up and in high school, but then I transitioned to rugby. I hadn't been in the pool for years, so that was one area that I had to get back from a fitness perspective, is distance swimming and short and long distance speed in the water. And that piece of conditioning had long since left. I remember the first time we started getting back in the pool, and I did, one lap in the Olympic-sized swimming pool at SMU and almost drowned, or it felt like it was going to. I was like, oh gosh, here's an area that I really need to work on. And also hadn't done any. Yeah, I found a weakness. But also on the other side, I hadn't done a lot of distance running, really solid distance conditioning. You do, not that you're not running marathons in BUD/S, but you are doing 4-mile timed runs in sanded boots. And you also have to qualify for and pass the PT test, which involves running, swimming, push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups. It's all timed. You have to make the minimum standards. And these days, they expect you not just to make the minimum standards, but to blow them out of the water. These days, guys will make the minimum standards and still not be selected. So it's become very competitive, sort of in this post 9/11 world we live in. And the community is obviously, there's been quite a spotlight shined on the SEAL community, for better or worse. It has actually enhanced our ability to recruit, which is a good thing. And then there's obviously some negative aspects about it. But so the training had to be such that I wanted to, at least my strategy was to leave fitness. That's just it would not be a question. Fitness would never be a challenge, not just for passing the test, but for being in BUD/S. So there's plenty of other stress, both academic, just anxiety in general, of potentially of getting injured and being dropped, and then you're still stuck in the Navy. So I didn't want to be in the regular Navy, so I wanted to leave nothing to chance that I had control over. And the one thing you have control over is how fit you are when you show up. So that's one of the reasons we moved up to Crested Butte, so we could train at 10 and 11,000 feet altitude. We basically carved a training ground out of the mountain. We ran with long trail runs, carrying logs. We hung ropes up in trees and would do a lot of rope climbing to improve that ability and build upper body strength. All the calisthenics we need to do. We actually performed the SEAL PT entrance test, multiple times a week, timing ourselves, making sure that we were, good to go on the minimum requirements. We'd swim in ice-covered lakes to condition our body to extreme pain. We'd climb mountains. So it was a great experience. It was super fun, but also it prepared us. I say us. I did this with my college buddy, and then when we were ready, we joined the Navy, went off to boot camp, and took the test while we were at boot camp. And that's just the first step. You have to pass the test while you're in boot camp, and then if you pass, you get orders to BUD/S. And I was on what used to be called, I don't know if you still have it, it's called a SEAL Challenge contract, meaning I don't spend any time in the regular Navy. I go from boot camp, back then you had to go to what they call A school, which is basically a trade in the Navy, because 80-90% of the guys in each class aren't going to make it through BUD/S, so they have to have a skill that they're taught that they're going to fall back on when in the regular Navy. So, I picked the shortest one that was in San Diego, and it was like a sonar tech school, basically, being on a submarine, and did that for 4 weeks, and then went straight to BUDS. So the plan worked effectively, and the question, going back to what you said, mental versus physical, the only way, at least in my mind, that you can train yourself mentally for the rigors of BUDS is to train yourself ridiculously rigorously in a physical capacity, because that will obviously build mental fortitude, because you're getting out of your comfort zone on a regular basis. You're pushing your mental boundaries, and that's directly linked to your ability to push your physical boundaries. So that seemed to work well. And there's so much about the BUDS experience that it's a different journey for every person. There's no answer to what's the hardest part and how do you get through it. I get asked that all the time because I mentor guys through the program, and it's different for everybody. Everybody has a different emotional reaction to the stress of the environment.
That makes sense. Yeah. So here's a question for you on your BUDS experience in your BUDS class. I've heard you talk about before. You were in a unique timing situation there, pre 9/11, and then once you went through your qualifications, somewhere in there was 9/11, and so I think you were one of the first classes. Something else unique to my understanding about your experience with BUDS is, like, in your BUDS class was also David Goggins, another best-selling author, if I'm not mistaken. So we're ultimately here going to talk about how you've applied some lessons from the Navy to corporate leadership and culture. So here's my question about having an individual that's so driven, like a David Goggins. I mean, ultimately, you are a person, one individual that's either gonna pass BUDS or not pass BUDS, but there's a whole team element of it. When you have somebody as part of a team, whether it's that environment or a corporate environment that's so self-driven, is that motivating as a team? Is it challenging as a team?
It is. BUDS is unique in the fact that it's an individual sport and a team sport at the same time. So you're in it you have to focus on getting yourself through it. Now, obviously, you can lean on the other guys, and you can motivate one another, and you become very, very close. The brotherhood begins in the early days of BUDS as you lead up to, and especially go through Hell Week. But you're also losing guys every single day. So it's a weird dynamic. Imagine being in a medium-sized organization where the turnover is daily and it just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the cultural dynamic is constantly changing because people keep leaving every single day. And then you get into Hell Week, and you'll lose about half the class in the 4 weeks leading up to Hell Week, and then you'll lose everybody else that you're going to lose most likely in the first 2 days of Hell Week. Right. And David and I this was David's third BUDS class because he kept getting injured. And he and I were in boat crew 2 together, leading up to and during Hell Week. They arranged boat crews by height, and we're both 6'1", so they have the tallest all the way to the shortest. The shortest being the Smurf crew. That's what the instructors call it. They don't like being called that, but they're called that anyway. And David and I were talking about this the other day because he's writing the foreword for my next book, and I did some work with him on his book, just so we could refresh our memories on the stories that we had logged away in our brains from so many years ago. And it was crazy. The guy was so intense, and he really was a key driver in our boat crew's success. And I say success because everything you do in Hell Week especially is a race against the other crews. So they make everything you do. Now it's already miserable, and you're already in pain, and your skin is sloughed off by all the sand in your pants, and you're already usually either injured or sick before you go into Hell Week. And then, of course, everything you do is nonstop physical and mental torture, but then they also make it competitive. Add another layer of fun. The fun's more for the instructors, I think, than for the students. But in reality, they're teaching you to work in small teams, and they actually do some interesting leadership and sort of team culture experiments. I've seen them do this before. They did this in our Hell Week, and I've heard about them doing it in others where the boat crews, let's say we're doing all these races, or paddling out in the surf, coming back and running down the beach with our boats, whatever it is. They're timed evolutions, and obviously, they at least tell you, it pays to be a winner. Sometimes it does. Most of the time it doesn't. So if you're winning the race, you might get to like sit out the next race and get some rest. Usually they don't let you do that, but every now and then they do. And so what an interesting experiment, it's actually simple but very fascinating, is they'll take the boat crew leader from the crew that's winning the majority of the races and swap them out with the boat crew leader that's losing the majority of the races and see what happens. And what happens is actually pretty fascinating. The crew that was losing all the races almost instantly starts not winning every race, but they definitely move towards the front of the pack under new leadership because that leader clearly knows how to build a winning culture almost immediately and transform a broken culture in a small unit. And the boat crew that was winning all the races under new sort of, what we might call poor leadership still wins all the races. Why? Because that leader had already created such a strong winning culture that not one single person could break it.
The culture
and so
is
they do these little
Interesting.
things. Yeah, you think you're just getting tortured for the sake of being tortured, but they're actually teaching you these things. Everything is purposeful. I mean, they have it down to a science. So it's really interesting. And obviously being there with David and being in the same boat crew especially was fond memories. Miserable, but fond memories. And then he and I, we both went on to Team 5 together as well. We both after Buds, we had an unfortunate Buds experience. Our class leader actually died on a Wednesday night, basically Thursday morning of Hell Week. That's a very unusual thing to happen, but he was a great guy. He had been an intel officer at SEAL Team 1, and then had applied to Buds, was accepted, well loved in the community just for his time as an intel officer with Team 1. But he, leading up to Hell Week, he started getting sick, and he had pretty bad pneumonia. And by Wednesday night, we were mustered at the pool, and he'd been coughing up blood for 2 days, 3 days. He'd been in every single med check, getting checked out. The instructors allowed him to continue. They kept asking him. In hindsight, they probably should have pulled him, obviously. But we were in the pool doing an evolution called the Caterpillar Race. Which sucks, of course. your boat crew's basically in the water in a line swimming on your backs, but your legs are wrapped around the waist of the guy in front of you. So you only have your arms for propulsion, and you're also fully closed. And of course it's a race. Then all of a sudden John suffered severe pulmonary edema. His body went limp and he sank to the bottom of the pool like he had cement boots on.
Oh my gosh.
Essentially drowned. They tried to revive him, and were unsuccessful.
Sorry to hear that. That's terrible.
Yeah, no, it sucked. It was my first Navy funeral, and I honestly don't remember how many I've been to since then. So it was a sort of a weird foreshadowing because the commanding officer of Buds, a few hours later, when he basically just walked in the room, we still didn't know what was going on, and he just walked in, said, "John's dead. Lieutenant Parado, you're taking over as class leader." And then he said to another guy, to John's roommate, he said, "Don't take John's shit." That's all he said, literally. And then he followed that. He kind of took note of the room. And I mean, we were obviously just broken individuals at that time. So some guys were crying. Some guys just had like 1,000-yard stare.
Right.
Because John was a very, very loved guy. And he basically just said, "Get used to it. This is not going to be the first guy who's going to die that you're going to know, and it won't be the last."
Wow.
And then he walked out of the room like it was just another fucked up day at Bud's.
Wow.
It was a very strange experience, and then they called Hell Week on Thursday morning. They secured us. So they secured us essentially a day early. And so instead of the instructors being, of course, their usual empathetic selves, they tortured us brutally for the rest of first base because we had not finished Hell Week.
For that one day that you missed.
But when someone dies, they have to, like something like that, they had to secure Hell Week because investigations were happening and all sorts of other craziness. Gotcha. So the instructors beat the hell out of us, worse than they normally do.
Beautiful.
Because we were then labeled the class that didn't finish Hell Week. So after Hell Week, you normally get what's called a walk week. So you're on average, you're running about 60 miles a week in Buds because you run to every class. You run to chow and back 3 times a day, and that's 2 miles just there. So it's 6 miles just running to go eat. Then you have your 4-mile timed runs every day, and then you have all this running to every evolution, running to every classroom session. So you're running about 60 miles a week. But after Hell Week, they give you a walk week so your body can heal because your body's just absolutely broken. Your legs are so swollen that there's no definition between your thigh and your toe. And so since we were secured a day early, they did not give us a walk week. And that actually injured more guys, and more guys had to get rolled back because they didn't give us a walk week. I don't know whose stupid decision that was, but it was a poor one, in my opinion.
Gotcha. The recovery
So,
week.
yeah,
Gotcha.
we had a very interesting BUDS experience, and then 9/11 was 2 days before my class started advanced training, which obviously was a big mental transformation in and of itself.
Wow. Yeah, you guys were unique in a number of ways. That's incredible. I didn't know some of that story. So you ultimately you didn't make a full 20-year career out of the Navy,
Right.
but you did deploy, I think, at least a couple times overseas, including Africa, because when I told my son, hey, I'm got the honor of speaking to Brent Gleeson here coming up, and he goes, is that the guy with the monkey on his head? he had seen your picture.
Yes, that's me. Yeah, a few tours, Iraq, a couple times in Africa, and yeah, so we were actually the first SEAL task unit from Team 5, or actually the first SEAL task unit period to be deployed into Iraq when Iraq kicked off. So we arrived there in April of 2003. SEAL Team 3 and some other assets had been involved in the initial assault on taking down and securing the gas oil platforms. This was happening simultaneously as the bombs were in the air heading to Baghdad, and then we turned over with them while we were staged at Ali Al Khalim Air Base in Kuwait, and then we were the first task unit to actually enter Baghdad. We were there predominantly performing what we call capture or kill missions. Basically direct assaults, hunting down, the guys on the deck of cards, blacklist, et cetera. So it was a very busy and kinetic deployment. A lot of constantly changing rules of engagement, no infrastructure. I mean, it was the Wild West back then. When we got there, we were living in bombed out palaces and buildings, drinking hot water because the pallets of water would be sitting out in the sun all day. Oh. So it was literally boiling, drinking boiling Beautiful. Water at nighttime. And yeah, it was awesome. It was really great.
How long were you in the Navy total?
I was in 6 years.
6 years.
So it was starting to be busy, but I also had not planned on doing it as a career. Fully transparent. I do have, you can look at it on both sides. I do have regrets for getting out when I did, because at the time, none of us knew how long these conflicts could possibly ever go on. Not that that's a reason, but I just assumed they wouldn't. And wanted to go to grad school and get back into the business world. But here we are.
Right. Right. Here we are.
A few deployments sound like a lot to the layperson, but these days it's not. And I've got buddies who've done 14 combat tours. I mean, it's obviously these are career SEALs. I've got guys who put me through training and are still in the teams.
Wow.
So it's
yeah, and at the pace that even you were running back then, that's pretty incredible. So you went out, you got your MBA. I know you started and transacted a couple firms that you had created, and and so these days you are running Taking Point Leadership. Read the book. I know when I had a chance to meet you back in December, I said, hey, full disclosure, I pre-ordered your book and still had not read it at the time. But I said, I'm going to do it, and I did. And I really like, so what you have that's, to me, very different about the typical book of, hey, I brought some amazing lessons and things I learned from an organization like the Navy SEALs, and I'm applying them to the corporate world. But what's different, you've got a lot of data-driven approach to things, and you've got very sort of actionable, almost prescribed steps. You literally have 10 steps that you broke into 3 parts. And the foundational aspect of it is culture, and culture being critical for scale. And a lot of people leave that, paraphrasing from your book, people leave culture last or to the side and focus on growth and financials. But in reality, I think you make the point that culture directly impacts financials.
Oh yeah, it totally does. And the book, that being my first book, it was obviously a great learning experience. When I decided that I wanted to do it, it's long story short, I built and sold a couple companies since grad school, but I really had a passion, not necessarily for those specific industries that were more tech focused, but a real deep passion for building teams, building organizations, building a great culture, developing people for leadership, developing other leaders. Not that I was perfect. I was learning as I was going too. My quote unquote wisdom is just a long line of costly mistakes. I think that's the same for a lot of us out there, but it's funny how in business, every mistake you make actually has a financial cost to it. So, in late 2016, I sold the second company, and the follow-on plan there was to write the book Taking Point. And I wrote it in a specific way. There was a specific strategy. I didn't want to write just another pipe hitter war story book. I wanted to build the foundation of thought leadership that I could build a company around. So it's not necessarily as you say, I try to be very prescriptive, very data-driven in approach, so the book could be a tool for leaders and managers and organizations going through any type of change. So I went out and through some networking, through some other guys, found a great literary agent in New York. He worked with me on the proposal. Hated the first couple rounds that I sent him because I had no idea what I was doing. I like the guy because he's a straight shooter. He's like, nope, don't like it. Nope, don't like it. I was like, just tell me what to do. Because I was, the first thing I sent him was, and a book proposal is very different than a book itself. It's more of a marketing piece. So you're writing a description of the book and why you're writing the book and why it's important that you're writing this book now and who's the audience. And you're giving little snippets of sample chapters and then a full sample chapter. And what I initially sent him was he's like, this is like 15 books, Brent. You need to find a focus. You need to narrow this down. So the book Taking Point was literally one chapter from the initial proposal. And that's broken, as you can see, broken into 10 principles. So great guy, really helped me through that stressful and lengthy process. And then the key there is find a lead agent that will help you get the project to a place where they believe in it. And when they believe in it, they're going to put their name on it and go out and take it to all the big publishers they think will buy it. So one afternoon in New York, he set up meetings with Simon & Schuster and Hachette and all the big players out there. And after 4 meetings, by 5 o'clock, we, by the grace of God, had 4 offers. So you got to create a little bit of a bidding war. But it was also, you want to find the right team. And so I found a great team at Simon & Schuster. Ironically, my editor had dated a SEAL after college. So I was like, perfect. You're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And so it went well. It was a relatively fast timeline with my second book that I'll talk about later. I'm on a more appropriate 2-year timeline from the time you sign the deal to the time you actually publish. This was a 1-year timeline. So for pretty aggressive. Not sure why anybody didn't say, hey, Brent, this is too aggressive, but now I know, right? And the strategy actually worked well. The book's done well, and the feedback's been fantastic. People talk. A lot of people who have given the most praise of it have read it 2 or 3 times. They've used it as a tool in their organization or with their team in their organization, which was exactly what I wanted. And so the next phase of that in 2018 and this year was to continue to build curriculum around it, build a team around that, which has become Taking Point Leadership. So we're a progressive, data-driven consulting firm focused on leadership and organizational development, culture transformation, really enhancing engagement and performance to drive growth and positive financial returns within an organization. We obviously have a very specific business strategy and very specific goals and KPIs every year, and we're executing pretty well against those. And what's great is we're building great case studies. I don't mean just for our own marketing purposes, but what's really cool is to see how this stuff really does transform an organization. And for example, we're wrapping up a year-long program with a big medical device company, working with 20 of their global sales leaders. And an interesting data point, one of the things we weave into these is on 360 reviews. So every participant does 360s at the beginning and at the end. So these are obviously anonymous peer reviews. So their direct reports rate them based on a specific set of questions. Their peers rate them and their boss rates them. And so you get a baseline set of data on basically where they are and how they're perceived and what their actual leadership and management capabilities are. Even more so what the perceived leadership and management capabilities are. And so this is a group of sales leaders, regional, global sales leaders. And so the 2 people that improved their 360 scores the most throughout this program from beginning to end went from the third and fourth in sales in the organization to the first and second in the organization. So you can see how enhanced leadership, this is, a sales side of the organization, improves their ability to lead and engage their team, coach and mentor their team members, enhance their ability to basically close deals. And so it actually had a great financial return on investment because of their ability to improve their leadership capability.
So it's going straight to the bottom line. That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, it's got to have an impact on P&L performance. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless.
Pointless, or at least ethereal.
At least from the point of view of the person writing the checks.
Exactly. No, and I think you just answered sort of one of the questions I was going to have for you is I've seen you kind of schlepping around the airport doing the 6 a.m. flight thing, and I sort of wondered, Brent currently is the face of the brand. How do you scale something that requires you on the road, given your spiel on a weekly basis? I think you just answered it. You're creating a construct and a set of tools and a system that can be replicated and taught and measured, and you're also building this arsenal of case studies to grow from.
Well, it's a great point, because that is obviously part of our growth and brand strategy is to move away from the Brent Gleeson brand, obviously maintaining that for specific strategic reasons, because most of the clients we get for these longer term contracts come through speaking engagements or half-day workshops and things like that I'm facilitating. But at the end of the day, I can only be in so many places, and I'm trying to scale a business here. So there's got to be a team, there's got to be a program and proprietary framework and curriculum that essentially anybody can go out and teach. So we're gradually building a team of full-time and contractors of like-minded individuals with similar backgrounds, both some military, some consulting side, some both. We've got a great team of some former military, some SEALs, PhDs, MBAs, people who've worked at Deloitte or people who've run their own companies. And that's important too, because we want people who've actually done this stuff before, not just been a consultant for one of the firms, but people who've actually executed these principles in their own organizations. Now, it's not always an imperative, but it does set us apart from, other boutique firms that, their team members have only just consulted based on a set of academic best practices.
Right. No, it's a great differentiator. So what kind of companies or executives should maybe look to Taking Point for help, and how would they go about that? And just since you've been out there, who are some of the sort of world-class business organizations you think are doing these things the right way?
It's a good question. Most organizations today and most great organizational leaders today know all of this stuff is important. Some do it well, some don't do it well. Some organizations try to do it internally. Some bring in outside consulting firms, or a blend of both, which is common as well. The main thing is not just having the desire to enhance leadership and their organizational design and their culture, but really have the strength and willingness for the follow-through. And that's where a lot of organizations fall short, is they go through the motions and they do these surveys and employee engagement surveys and 360s, and they'll bring some consultants in once a quarter, things like that. But there isn't really a lot of on-the-job application. They're not engaging those participants in actual, goal-oriented activities as it relates to the business itself. It's more classroom theory, academics, and then everybody goes on about their business doing things the same way they've done them always.
Right.
And that's why organizations, our programs are really designed to transform the organization, not just to improve some people's communication style or their EQI or how their management capability, but to really to have that drill deep down into the organization from the top all the way to the bottom, removing vertical and horizontal silos, enhancing their operating model, and really transforming the culture to high performance. And you can only really do that and thereby increasing employee engagement. The number one best way to do that is to improve more or less the middle manager's ability to lead. Because in a perfect world, the great organizations, we kind of assume that, everybody's emotionally connected to the mission narrative, and they're connected to the values and the guiding principles and the culture of the organization. But my experience in research shows that most employees, the bulk of the employees in an organization, are directly impacted by their their direct manager's style, tone, and the subculture that that manager creates within their team and their organization. So it's important that those managers have an ability to connect their style, tone, and the subculture they create to the larger organization's vision and desired culture.
Gotcha.
But the problem is, in most organizations, is, and I've done this many times in the past, where we promote people into management positions based on what? Usually tenure or subject matter expertise or both, but not on leadership capability. The best organizations that are getting this right are promoting people into key management positions more so based on their ability to lead, to inspire, to mentor, to coach, to emotionally connect those people to the work that they do. And these younger generations in the workforce want to know they're doing meaningful work. And oftentimes they just don't realize it because they're not coached on how their tasks, their job responsibilities, their day-to-day duties derive mission success for the organization, for the customer, for making the world a better place, whatever the tone of the organization is set for. They're oftentimes just not coached on that, or they're not told. So they're kind of disengaged. They're just kind of doing the bare minimum, going through their daily activities. And the research still shows that usually only about 30%, maybe a little bit more, about a third of an organization's team members are actively engaged, emotionally connected. They go above and beyond. The bulk of people in most organizations are disengaged. We have a subset that are actively disengaged and working against the organization.
Right, which is a crazy statistic in terms of cost of productivity, lack of productivity, retention, things like that.
Well, the interesting thing is what's fascinating and that I love about this stuff is that we work with all types of organizations, different sizes, different industries, from healthcare and medical to the airline industry to energy to technology to construction. All the challenges are pretty much identical that they face. It just stays organizational complexity. It's the fact that we have so many different human personalities in an organization that are difficult to manage. Now we have on average in larger companies 5 generations in an organization as opposed to 3. And leaders and managers and organizations are just still trying to figure out how to manage all the complexity and disruption and constant change that we're in now. It didn't really used to be that way 20, 30 years ago. But, the world of business and the workplace is totally different. The expectations of the employees are totally different, which makes leadership more complex than it's ever been before. And that's what we're here to do, is to help create, if nothing else, leadership alignment at the top of the organization, but also have that bleed down to creating better leaders at every point of the compass in the organization. That's what we have in special operations. Our culture is to have everyone lead. Everybody leads. I don't care if you're the newest new guy, you're the platoon commander, you lead the entire team. It doesn't matter. Everybody is expected to lead on the battlefield, to lead in training, to lead every day, whether you're building pallets to go on a training trip or you're in a gunfight in Ramadi. Everybody's expected to lead. And the organizations in the business world that can achieve that leadership at all levels philosophy are going to outpace their competitors. They're going to have better financial returns. They're going to grow faster, and they're going to retain more employees.
Interesting. Yeah. So on leadership, and which you certainly hit on numerous times in the book, and what you guys do as a firm, communication also comes up, and you mentioned 360 approach. So just to take one of these elements, communication and the 360, which I think you mentioned it's classically done as an anonymous survey, but you've also talked about your background in the military, where you'd have after action reports that are, leave your ego at the door, leave your rank at the door, and it's an all out session where everybody's got to have sort of thick skin and the expectation that there's going to be brutally honest and transparent communication. Have you found a way to create that sort of openness in a corporate hierarchical culture?
Yeah, one of the blocks of curriculum that we teach is not just strategic planning, but how to perform an AAR, or after action review, or a debrief, whatever, or postmortem, whatever they want to call it. We teach them to call it an after action review because that's what we know, and that's what has a little bit more impact, because the way we teach it is how we do it in the military and how we do it in the SEAL teams. So it doesn't matter if it's a training scenario or a real life combat situation, we perform an AAR after everything we do. It's part of our feedback loop. It's part of our learning culture. But where organizations that even do it get it wrong is it's not documented. That information is not shared to the appropriate people afterwards. there's not a center of excellence where they can go back and say, oh, I think we had this challenge on this one specific project last time. Let me go look and find this document where we keep them and read the after action review, the intel report, whatever you want to call it, to make sure I know we have a list of what went right, what went wrong, and action items for how we're going to do it better next time, so we can avoid the same pitfalls. And that's what we teach organizations how to do, not just do the briefs properly and have a culture of openness, transparency, the ability to engage in respectful conflict without emotion, hopefully. And then also document the feedback that comes from that meeting and push it out to the rest of the organization or push it out to the appropriate people that need to learn from it. That's where the buck just kind of usually stops with the debrief, if the teams or organizations do it at all. But half of what you might spend your time doing at the quote unquote office in the teams is reading intel reports from the battlefield. That's one of the ways we've continually transformed our community in the best ways we can, training, the way we train, the way we deploy, the way we're structured, the resources we invest in, how we recruit, how we develop talent. In large part, in the past 19 years, has been based on lessons learned from the actual battlefield. We've changed a lot of our strategies, a lot of our tactics, a lot of where we invest our time training because of those lessons learned. And when organizations can do that and create that constant feedback loop and push that information out to the team, then in the best case scenario, they're in a constant state of improvement, a constant state of learning. And therefore, they can course correct more rapidly when they face challenges. They can learn from things that not just that went well and celebrate those wins, but also let's talk about where we messed up and how we're going to do it better.
Nice. I like that. That's something really actionable and really good to know also that is a tool not only that you guys describe, but that as an organization, if you come in to help, that you teach and teach how to use not only once, but ongoing as a knowledge base, action items, and then something to look back on and survey and continue to learn from.
We also help them. The main things, yeah, exactly. And the main things that we do is we ensure that there are total accountability mechanisms put in place that they're going to use for years to come, in theory.
Right.
So that it's not just us popping in and out, teaching a workshop or doing these 2-day sessions once a quarter. There's constant touch points. We give them actual frameworks, tools, and models to use. We hold them accountable to using those, because when we come back the next time, we're going to ask them how they're using them, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what they need to do to pivot and to improve using those specific tools. Everything from how to run a 15-minute weekly stand-up meeting to how to do a one-on-one review with their direct reports, to how to navigate conflict, to how to have difficult conversations, to everything, how to bleed the culture into achieving actual specific company results. We give them the actual tools. So it has to go way beyond classroom theory and just assuming they're going to use it, because most of the time, if it stops there, they're just
right. That would be
not even the most well-intentioned leaders in organizations, because they're just so busy.
You're busy.
Constant change, constant disruption. Yeah,
you get busy. Yeah, and I love the accountability component of it as well. So if your current book, Taking Point, was really just one chapter out of this massive proposal you'd written, so you've got another book coming out, I think, late next year. And my understanding is that it's going to be somewhere around topics like personal transformation, facing discomfort, embracing the suck. Is that going to apply also in your consultancy and back to the corporate world?
Well, it is. I mean, this book's going to be a totally different product, and I'll explain how it's going to apply to our programs as well, within our company. But this book is all about personal transformation, very story based. It's think a blend of maybe Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck and David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. I don't have a background like David, but and I'll explain that in a minute. But sort of more raw, in your face, no bullshit, none of the fluffy nonsense that you get in a lot of these self-improvement books, but really designed to teach the reader how to expand the boundaries of their comfort zone, how to live through adversity, how to learn from pain and suffering, lean into it, use it as a powerful energy force to do great things. We've all faced adversity off and on, different magnitudes throughout our entire lives, and we will until we go over the great divide someday. But this book I'm really enjoying writing it because it's really fun to write. I'm not focusing a lot on data. There's some research I sprinkle in there just to kind of validate some of the models and things I put in the book. And each chapter will have a tool for the user to read or to use, like a lot of the good books I like out there. But yeah, it's been it's been a fun, very creative, wild ride. And it's going to be a great book. But it's to your other point. It is also very applicable to what we do, especially from a leadership development standpoint, because as you can imagine, leadership development is intensely personal to the person going through these programs. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody changes differently. Everybody's passionate, motivated by different things. So there is a huge element of personal transformation when you're talking about developing ourselves as leaders. And it has to be constant. And a lot of what we do in leadership roles is difficult. There's lots of adversity. There's lots of change. There's pain. There's suffering because leadership is hard. So there is that element to it that's going to be a fun added value to the programs that we have. But yeah, it's going to be good. I'm really enjoying writing it. And David is going to he's going to write the foreword to it. So.
Sounds like it's going to be a fun one to work on. I look forward to reading it. Just quick mention on the culture piece before we switch gears to family. Have you read The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle?
Yes, I have. It's been years, but I have read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just came across that one fairly recently, and he's very scientific in being able to measure group interaction and team productivity, things like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great book. I have it on my shelf in the office.
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, leadership in the corporate world. You're also father of three. How do you take some of this stuff back for those of us as parents to the battlefield of three crazy kids running around the house?
Yeah, no, totally. And I've done some podcasts specifically around fatherhood, and while we're doing sort of for lack of a better phrase, the book tour, the promo tour, doing a bunch of talk shows and things like that. One of them was the Home and Family Show filmed there in LA. And what they wanted to do was to take the principles in the book and gear it towards their audience and talk about how those principles apply to family. So how do we define the culture of our family? What are our values? What do we care about? How do we build trust and hold ourselves accountable to doing the right thing? How do we engage the family in, the activities that are important to us? Discipline. Resilience, all the 10 principles in the book apply, of course, well to any family. And as you know, the family dynamic can be complex, can be stressful, it's fun, constantly changing. We've got three kids. We've got everything from 13 down to 5 and 3. So very different dynamics from middle school, new teenager to a wild 3-year-old son who just wants to kick and punch stuff. So if anybody's going to be a SEAL in this group, I think it's going to be Ryder, our 3-year-old. My wife gets a little annoyed because he's sweet and very sensitive, but he's also extremely aggressive. He'll walk out of the playroom with a Spartan helmet, sword, and shield on, just out of nowhere, and just walk up to you and want to engage in warfare.
That sounds like a powerful combination. Well, I mean,
but he's also very sensitive too. He's kind of like me. He's like very sensitive, but he's a warrior on the battlefield.
He's got both halves.
But it's one of the things that we did do this at the beginning of our family, just like the SEAL teams didn't draft our Navy SEAL ethos at the beginning and the inception of the teams. The SEAL ethos didn't come around until 2005. So one of the things we teach organizations is how to develop a team charter. As you know, a lot of companies have their core values and they post them on their website, and maybe they might talk about them at an annual meeting, but that's usually where it ends. What a team charter is 3 layers. It's your core values, or you can call them guiding principles. What do we stand for? Why do we exist? What's important to us? And then you go to a layer deep of supporting behaviors. Okay, well, what are the behaviors we expect of ourselves and others to ensure that we're living by these core values? And then the third layer deep is, what are the exact accountability mechanisms? How am I going to hold myself accountable and others to those behaviors so that we know we're living by the values? So there's 3 layers to a team charter. So one of the things that my wife and I sat down and we were like, well, why are we doing this for ourselves? Why don't we define who we are as a team? What are our family's core values? And what are those supporting behaviors to ensure we're living by those values? And what are our accountability mechanisms? How are we, let's say, for example, wellness is a core value for the family. We want to make sure that we're eating well, that we're fit, we're exercising on a regular basis. Okay, great. Wellness is your core value. Well, what are the supporting behaviors? Well, okay, I want to make sure that I exercise 5 times a week for this amount of time, this mix of types of exercise. I want to get our young kids into fitness and exercise. Well, how are we going to do it? What are those behaviors? What does that look like? When do we go to bed? When do we get up? Where do we make that time? Not just, we don't have time. Where do you make the time? And then what are those accountability mechanisms? What time am I going to get up in the morning? Which day? Where am I going to put in my calendar that I'm working out, that I'm blocking, that I'm not going to deviate from? So trying to get as specific as possible to live by the values that your family cares about, that you want to stand for, that you want your kids to stand for. That's just one example of something that I talk about in the book from a culture perspective. And also, I'm actually writing about that specifically in the new book. One of the chapters is about the importance of personal values. And a lot of people get that, they understand it, but we deviate from those values and make decisions that aren't based on those values. So how do I develop my own personal values manifesto? So I put an actual tool similar to what I just described in that book. But that's just one example of how you can take some of these principles and apply it in the family dynamic. So that there's alignment, there's understanding. You can always take difficult conversations or key learning moments back to that team charter and say, okay, this thing happened and we were upset about it. So how did the team charter apply? Did we deviate from our values? So that's just one example of many.
Right. No, it's a great example. Brilliant. I've done that as an individual, sat down to find my personal ethos, have not done that with the family team. So I'm going to take that away and thanks for leaving me with that one. Well, one question on parenting. So I know you've done some single parenting.
Oh yeah. Well, it's one of the more challenging times in my life was being a full-time single parent for 3 years to a toddler. So as he grew out of toddlerhood into a young boy, but it ended up that I had Tyler for several years by myself, while also simultaneously running 2 companies, one company, and then starting the second business, trying to figure out how the hell to be a single parent. Whereas I had been focused largely on the businesses and not so much on where Tyler's socks are and what time he has to be at school and how to pack a lunch quickly in the morning, while also feeding him and getting him dressed when he's screaming and running around the house like a crazy person. It was challenging, very, very stressful. So I have a lot of empathy for those strong moms and dads out there who are single parents, because it is not an easy thing to do. It's an emotional roller coaster. But at the end of the day, my oldest and I have a very, very strong bond. And that's where it began. And then I met my amazing wife. It was one of those things where the stars aligned. I went to a wedding in Costa Rica. Apparently one of my best friends from Buds and from SEAL Team 5. His name's Justin. He was a platoon commander at Team 5. He ended up marrying my wife's best friend from childhood. They grew up in Newport Beach, California. And my wife was actually there when they met. They were on a surfing trip in Costa Rica, the guys were, and then they were in Costa Rica just on a girls' trip. And so Nicole, my wife, was there when Brittany met Justin. And so ironically, I had 2 weddings that weekend. One of my best fraternity brothers from SMU, like the kind of wedding that like my parents were invited to. And then I had this wedding in Costa Rica, one of my best SEAL team buddies. So I'm thinking a wedding in Houston in the summertime or a wedding in Costa Rica. So I chose the right path. So I went I went by myself, and Nicole was there, and her mom was her date. So that worked out. And we met, the first day we all arrived, and by the third day I told her we were going to get married. That was a big risk. I knew one of 2 things was going to happen, that she was going to run for the hills, or at least be moderately interested to see where that might go. But I remember telling her, I meant it. It was one of those things where I just knew. And being a single parent, I also needed some help. No, I'm kidding. But I knew the stars aligned, and we got, this is kind of backwards. Most people think this might be crazy, but we got matching tattoos 4 weeks later.
That's locking it in, commitment right away.
Yeah, I was like, you think you could do the ring first and then or never do the tattoos? But no, we did the tattoo 4 weeks later, and then got engaged 2 months after that. And then we eloped and got married just down to courthouse in San Diego 7 days after that. And then we had our big wedding the following summer in Deer Valley, Utah. But it worked out because I was living in San Diego and she was living in Los Angeles. So we're like, okay, it's not New York and San Diego, but it's still, there's still some distance there. But by, again, the grace of God, I think it was a week or 2 weeks after that wedding in Costa Rica, I was going to be living in LA for 6 weeks filming the TV show Stars Aren't Stripes for NBC that I did with the late Chris Kyle, a good friend of mine, American Sniper, and some other former Spec Ops. Basically, the show was, I don't know if you saw it, but it was a show where they paired former special operators with celebrities, and we'd train them in tactics and shooting and how to take down targets, and then we'd compete against the other teams. And the money that was raised for the show went to Wounded Warrior and some other veteran-based charities. But so I was living in LA for 6 weeks at the Marriott in Thousand Oaks, and so that put me very close to her in Santa Monica. So we got to spend every day together during that time, and so that's probably one of the catalysts to the fast track plan that we put in place.
It's crazy how things work like that. I had a coach say to me recently. He told me a story of his own background, and the point of the story was that bad things happen in life, but as if we have perspective on it, those things somehow they ultimately lead to equal and opposite sort of positive things, and so it sounds like you're on a great track, and it's a brilliant story. I love it. Congratulations to you, Nicole. Before we wrap, I think all your proceeds from your book go to one organization, the SEAL Family Foundation, helping veterans and families in transition, and then maybe March of Dimes as well. Are you still involved with both?
Yes, we're an ambassador family for March of Dimes, and then I'm on the executive board of the SEAL Family Foundation, and my wife and I, in that regard, also chair our biggest annual gala here in San Diego.
Nice. Okay. Again, I really appreciate the time, Brent. Sorry to wrap that last point up so quickly, but I'm going to put a link to your book, to your organization, and of course the SEAL Family Foundation as well in the show notes here, so people can get involved and find out more if they're interested. And then
thanks, sir.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and love to try to find some ways to work together in the corporate world on Taking Point, or at least steer you to some organizations that could benefit from the help.
I appreciate it. It was fun, great chat, good to catch up with you. And let's try to get together face to face here in the very near future.
Yeah, we're both local, so let's try to make that happen. And I really appreciate it.
Sounds good, brother. Thank you, and talk to you soon.
Yeah, chatting with Brent was really insightful, and that was a lot of fun. It took us a little while to get our schedules aligned, but I'm really glad we stuck with it to make that one happen. Not only is Brent a world-class achiever in his own right, but I've really got to hand it to anybody who survived Navy SEAL training on a boat crew with somebody as intense as Mr. David Goggins. I can personally recommend the book. I've been through it a couple times, Taking Point. Highly recommend checking it out. And their consulting services are definitely worth a look for your business as well. They're agnostic on industry, and it can apply to really a company in any stage of growth. Links to Brent's company, contact information, book, his Inc. and Forbes columns, website, social media, all that, you can head on over to manofmastery.com/018, manofmastery.com/018. And I will have links to all of that information in the show notes for this episode. And let me know your feedback as well. I'm interested to know what you thought about the episode and how you like the book when you pick it up and check it out. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week. I've got another Brent coming up, and we're going to talk about, in contrast or maybe comparison to taking lessons from the military to apply to the corporate world, we're going to look at taking lessons learned from a nonprofit mission organization and lessons learned there applied back to corporate life.